to tape this. I can't tell you how many tapes I've put together. I've got more PowerPoints and keynote talks made, but I have such a hard time taking my audio and putting it with the video and doing it in a way that makes sense and looks good, and organizing all the photographs and all that's overwhelming. And so what I thought is, when I'm walking in nature, I do my very best thinking. And so today I'll get started in what's a very natural environment for me, where I feel most comfortable. I don't have all the answers. I never have and never will. But throughout my life, I've been so blessed to have been associated with some of the finest people in the world. And it hasn't been my fault. I haven't done anything, well, to orchestrate that. Maybe I have, in a way that I'm so curious. And there are so many smart people. I've always wanted to hang out with them and listen to them. So I've had such a great blessing of that. And one of the highlights, probably the top highlight of my life, was meeting Doug Vogt. I was on a search for truth, which began on January 6, 2021, when I attended the Trump deal in DC. And I watched what I thought was an honorable country fall apart right in front of me. And I knew things were really bad. Things were not right. That day just about killed me. Oh my God, I was one of the most patriotic people ever, my entire family. As a matter of fact, I'm related to, I think, 4 presidents, and Madison, Washington, Pierce, which was one of the worst, and Harrison, I think. Anyway, and my son is directly related to Pocahontas. We have a deep history, and I have loved this country with everything inside of me. But the country isn't the admin, is it? When I first found out that, I think I'll turn this around and let you look at this beauty. When I first found out that my ancestors were famous, very famous, kings and queens, and I was studying Jamestown and figured out that those were my family members, the ones entombed, the Actons or Astons, they've got it both ways, were direct grandparents of my grandmother, Nicely, whose name was Ball. And that's also the relationship through George Washington. Studying that, I noticed so many things that were just uncommon to what I thought to be true. Just reading the diaries and things like that. And I found out that my grandfather, great grandfather, I think 8 or 9, was in George Washington's diary, and they were neighbors with the Fairfaxes. I was so proud. Oh my goodness. I thought, man, I came from West Virginia. I thought I was just an Appalachian hillbilly until I found that. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? It was like just crazy. And I was happy that I found out before my mom died because she was so interested in all that. Well, that came about at the same time as me looking into the January 6th deal. So doors started opening up for truth. And where I thought my family were these brave, courageous, and they were people that were all benevolent and didn't want anything but to find new land and to build a new country on behalf of humanity. Oh my gosh, did I ever live in a fairy tale land? I thought that they were honorable regent. And boy, quickly I realized that every parcel of land was taken by them. And it was not any benevolent anything. That religion played a huge part. And they came over here to pilfer, to take, and to set up this religious system that was really, I believe, that the admin and religion have been hand in hand since, well, they have been since the very beginning. It's one and the same. They just use it to, it's just like wearing a white hat and a black hat. That's all it is, I'm telling you. So I found Doug in my research. I didn't know at first to look in old books. At first, I just loved old books. I've always loved books. So I pulled out my old books and started looking and found things that I'd never heard. This one book from 1729, I believe, talked about the cycle of the world and how this was like the sixth time the earth had come and gone, turned over, whatever. And I thought, I've never heard that. Well, I kept looking and looking and digging, and it seemed that every bit of information that I needed was in a book that was discarded, or when I went to the page on the internet, it was no longer available. Isn't that interesting? So that gave me some further clues, and I began researching into all kinds of old books. I went to my thrift store and I made them a deal that if they would let me take all the old books, I would donate them back when I finished. And I've obviously spent money collecting some, but they're not easy to find. And you have to connect the dots. Now, what does that say to you? We know that the narrative is everything. It's everything. What we believe rules us. And what we believe comes from what we're taught. And if you have control of the education and the media, you're in control of what we know and think, right? Crazy. During this time, I found out that I started like everybody else probably. I was a Fox News watcher. Didn't take me long after January 6th to see that they were frickin' liars. I mean, almost immediately, I had done a lot of background in the Ukraine deal. And so I could tell when they were just out and out lying. And then the COVID thing, I had all the information from being a funeral director and working in the funeral industry. So I could gather all those end of life death reports and figure for myself what was going on. So that added a whole dimension to the lying that was so obvious. And I tried so hard to educate people about that, but as you know, the media is owned. So the first thing I do is I go to BBC, and obviously owned by the same. Then I find the Australian, no, I don't know. But anyway, I went through all the news, Sky News, and found out that was owned by the same. Then, once I figured out there was really no news that was available, I had to dig it all out for myself. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I became, oh my gosh, overwhelmingly, intensively convicted that I was going to find the answers, and I was going to figure out why we were being lied to all the time. Of course, when Tucker came out, it made me want to throw up, because you can't lie to people and play the game with the liars and then just decide you're going to switch sides. As far as I'm concerned, that was a Fox News ploy, and still is. I don't care. I don't care about Tucker. The whole political game is a game. It's theater for you. Because if they keep the red and the blue fighting, you're going to be far too busy to dig out the information critical to your own life. You're not going to have time for that. So CNN and Fox are perfect weapons of destruction. Nobody gets it. Nobody. The whole political game is so deeply corrupt and has been for years. There's no pulling out. I'm telling you what, I've gone over companies and rehabbed so many, and there's no hope. I'm sorry. Isn't that so pretty? So what do? We get truth so that at least we know what we're dealing with. When I found Doug, I was searching with all my heart, and I immediately wrote to him on YouTube. I found him on YouTube looking some things up, and I immediately wrote to him and said, listen, I am desperate to talk to you. How can I meet you? And look at these little star things. And lo and behold, he was local. So he allowed me to take him and his wife to lunch. And that started a great friendship. And I would call him and ask him questions. And one day I called him and said, Doug, I'm thinking that if our words have such power, what about our intent? And he said, no, I've thought that through, and you can find it on chapter 4, page 64 in this particular book. That's how he was for everything. And his ancestors were like mine. He had deep ancestry. And it looked like It was almost like he was designed to do what he did. And that's how I feel. And I can't explain it. And it's not fun. It takes your whole life. And for what? Sometimes I say, well, now I know all this. What good does it do me? It does me a lot of good. I'm free. I know that this beautiful world, all this, is just perfect. Without religion, without politics, without any admin. It's absolutely, phenomenally beautiful. And that's what I believe about you and I, is that we're perfectly made. Now, who made us? That's the big question, right? I've gone that route. At first, I wondered what was true. You start thinking, oh my goodness, if this isn't true, and it was foundational, what else isn't true? Kind of like when you find out your friend or your lover is lying, and then it's not the one lie, but it's the knowledge that they have the potential to lie. I have been so interested in this. Do you see it? I collected a couple last year. They're like a mushroom fungus, I think. And they're so very interesting. I hope you can see it. Isn't it beautiful? I don't know if they just go to those trees, but that's where I found them last year too. Where was I? Okay, so during this time, I also love fossils and mushrooms and everything natural, and I collect those things. So I'm constantly trying to learn about rocks, and archaeology is what I wanted to be when I was a little girl, but I never thought I was smart, and I never thought that that was something that a girl like me could ever do. So I'm doing it now and learning so much. And that's how I ran into Randall Carlson, who taught me sacred geometry. And that was phenomenal in my growth. I realized that everything, you and me are cycles. We have a birth cycle, we have a death cycle, we have an aging cycle, we have a menstrual cycle, we have cycles everywhere. There are seasons, there are days, there are hours. Cycling. Energy is cycling. Everything's moving constantly and cycling. And if we understand this, I believe we can apply it to our lives and see patterns and begin to learn newly from who we are. Because the most important thing about this life is knowing who we are. Know thyself. That's what the greats always say. Know thyself. That's the first step. Because really, if you don't know who you are, what in the world are you supposed to do with it? And maybe that's why we're so apathetic these days, right? What if we've been taught that we're sheep? For Christians, have you ever been around a sheep? They're the damnedest, dumbest animals alive. They follow one another to death. and laugh about it. They're idiots. I'm telling you. They don't think. They just follow. They don't ask questions. They don't want out of the sheep shite. That's why Piso, when he wrote the New Testament, said you were a sheep. A shepherd is a lowly place because the sheep are so dumb. Do you get it? They could have. God wouldn't call you a sheep, but Piso would. Trust me. Look at this. Probably come back. So here we are. We've been taught not to ask questions. If there was ever a good setup, could it be more complete than the Bible setup? The Jesus setup? Could it be better? It says, love your brother. What does love mean? No one knows. It could mean anything. And how are you going to love your brother if you don't know him? And how is your brother going to love himself if he thinks he's a sheep? He'll love himself like a sheep. That's not going to be very good. Do you see? It's so confound. And then, okay, so give unto Caesar. Okay, well, yeah. Why not put that in there? And turn the cheek to the enemy. Well, who the heck is the enemy? It's the admin. And you're going to turn your cheek just like we're doing every day. The apathy is so obnoxious. You just want to stick with what they've told you, even though it doesn't work. And you're not interested in any new news. Why? Why? Because they've told you that you won't go to heaven. And what happens if you don't go to heaven? You don't see the people you love, right? What a horrible thing. The fear is so predominant in Christianity. That's what I know the most about. But I'm going to say that it's true in everything. And it's been going on since the beginning of time very clearly. Very clearly. When you understand what I believe Joseph did, you'll get the picture. And it's just been repeating itself. That's it. It's just repeat, repeat, repeat. Reset, reset, reset. 1902. I'm still looking into 1871. There's something really weird about that year. Trust me, I'm collecting. And when I pull it together, I'm probably going to be more surprised than you. But it's a pretty tricky deal. One of the other things that was obvious from the beginning was my first inclination that the Bible wasn't real. Of course, I say to myself, Cindy, you're crazy. Don't try to prove something the whole world backs. Well, that's right up my alley. So I started with bios and decided to research the people that I was counting on for information, like Josephus. What a crook. Never was there a bigger crook. Never. He literally led 100 Jews to kill themselves and kind of tricked them into doing that. And he was the man that drew the last straw. And then he ran and hid like the little freak he was and thought everybody wanted to kill him, as the story goes. Of course, the Romans wanted to kill him. because he was a Jew. And the Jews wanted to kill him because he had taken care of 99 other Jews. But someone came by and said, "Hey, Josephus, you're like, look, there's a turkey. Gobble, gobble. Do you see it?" So this guy comes by and goes, "Josephus, you're like a hero. You know, the Romans are happy that you got the Jews handled." And so he made his way to Rome. And guess what? He was made chief historian. And that's where so much of our literature comes from. Now, you're going to find this out eventually, but he wasn't real. He was fake. When you're listening to videos, if you hear someone quote Manetho, or just Josephus, know that they probably have not gotten to where they need to be to understand the truth of it all. And I don't know anyone. I found it. I told Doug. He knew it. There's so many other people involved in that little tight circle of deception. But I don't know that anyone else, all the historians I listened to, quote one of those two incorrectly. But that's a whole nother tape. So I didn't even get to Joseph. There's so many layers to this. My original intent, my original objective was very clear to me, and that was to show how the powerful have manipulated the masses over time. I've done that. And nothing's different. It's the same program, the same pattern that just gets repeated because it works. And the only weapon necessary is media. The right narrative will take you anywhere you want to go. Yeah, we need to think about that. What's your narrative for you? What's my narrative for me? It wasn't this, I can tell you that. Look. I'm dedicated to truth. And if this is it, this is it. So I'm going to honor Doug and be faithful to communicate his work. No matter how long it takes me, I'm going to get it out. He died in December of last year. I was supposed to interview him. And when I texted, his son texted me back a few days later that he had died. I attended the funeral and I haven't been the same ever since. There's something very wrong about all that. And it's not up to me to even voice my opinion, but I think I know. I think you know what I'm talking about. People get quieted every day. And Doug had information that the entire world has spent a fortune to keep from you. That's the hard part of all this, the science part. The part about the earth changing cycles and where we are in it. And I spent my life trying to share good news. And I believe I do have good news because it's truth. How could anything be better than truth? Not possible. right? Not possible. So we're in this together. I think we have a zillion times more potential, possibility, and hope when we go forward with truth and not the BS that's been stuffed down our throats. Just last night, I was reading Farrer, one of my ancestors, and he was writing to a priest in England saying that they needed to get a Christian program to tame the imbeciles and the infidels in the new land. Isn't that just nice? That's what it was. That's what it's always been about. And the stories never change. But what we do with them could. We could. That looks like 2 hearts. It's what we do with what we know. So what are we going to do? I think I'll end this here and then start again to tell about Joseph, right? And I'll see if this works and if it makes any sense. Over and up.